Hi, everybody. I'm programmer Chris Metzler here, and welcome to the 24th annual SF Indie Fest. Um, we have found a lot of cool films from all around the world, and you've just had a chance to see the really great documentary Illumination. And we're lucky enough to have filmmaker Eric Bricker here. Thanks again for joining us, Eric.
Definitely, Chris. A pleasure to be here.
It was really fun to watch your film, particularly here during the pandemic, just because, I think we all get a bit of wanderlust, being stuck at home. And I think many of us are ready to kind of hit the road again at some point in time. Um, but whether the pandemic is going on or not, you've really told a really interesting story that I think many people are, curious about. How did you kind of decide that there was kind of a film to be made here, and like what were kind of how did you start kind of coalescing some of the pieces?
The initial spark for the whole project came from my producing partner, Lisa Hughes. She called me up one day, this was May of 2013, and said, "Hey, what about a documentary on Airstream travel trailers? From a design point of view, it's the perfect follow-up to our previous film, which is Visual Acoustics, The Modernism of Julius Schulman." So when she posed that question to me, it was just an immediate yes for me. And the first calls that we had were with the current president of Airstream, Bob Wheeler. And then we also had a call with the former president, Dickie Regal, and got a lot of information from them about like some of the broad strokes of the story. And then our first shoot was at the Airstream factory, and they gave us even more like, hey, you need to talk to this person and this person and this person. And that set us out on the journey that became Illumination.
Very nice. And what as a filmmaker, with these kind of stories that you tell that have kind of this design backdrop, what is it like that vantage point that kind of fascinates you, and how do you kind of divine that out in the stories that you're telling?
Yeah, this one was a difficult nut to crack. We started out with curiosity around the Airstream travel trailer as um, a design object, and also kind of this iconic, I'd say, like just image that seems like everybody in the US has emblazoned somehow in their minds and has some type of nostalgic feel towards it. So that was really the point of departure. What we didn't know about was this thriving community around Airstream. And that, like right away, we discovered that, and it took us to a whole different place in terms of um, our associations with Airstream and kind of like opening up more paths of curiosity. And then there was so much to it. It was quite challenging in trying to distill this whole Airstream thing into what resulted in a 76-minute documentary.
Well, yeah, it raises the question. I would kind of categorize this sort of genre documentary. We often just kind of call it kind of a survey documentary in some ways, because there's lots of kind of disparate characters that are built around this the same thing or subject matter. And like, so with these folks that were in the kind of Airstream aficionado community, how did you kind of figure out the people who had the most interesting stories to tell? I mean, was it a lot of word of mouth, and like, did you spend a lot of time on the road, or did you just was a lot of this kind of figure out ahead of time? Like, how much was there serendipity, and how much was it kind of pre-planned?
Yeah, it was a little bit of all of the above. So I mentioned we spoke with the former president and current president, met with head of marketing at Airstream, and I want to make one thing clear: this was not funded by Airstream. So actually, that was my first concern in starting the project, was how do we do this so it doesn't come across or just get labeled as branded content, which it's a complete 100% independently funded and produced
Mhm.
story. But so when we met with Airstream, they said, hey, here's the two people you should talk to right now. The first one is Dale Pee Wee Schwamborn, who's actually in the film, and also Rich Lure, who's in the film as well. And those two really opened up a number of channels Dale serves as the voice of Wally and like the keeper of the story. And Rich is Crossroads for all things currently Airstream. And so in meeting with those two, and thankfully they're both located in Arizona, Dale's just above Scottsdale and Rich was down in Tucson. I was able in one trip to interview them both. And those two said, hey, you need to talk to this person about that. So they really kind of sent this out. And then as you start to talk to more people, they say, hey, you need to talk to so-and-so. So this was a path, like all these paths started to open up. And I actually ended up shooting in 16 states. I did a final tally. So it kind of took me all over the place.
So did you have kind of a, a fascination outside of for design sense, but just like travel, I guess, or wanderlust? I mean, or how much of that kind of vagabond spirit, I guess, do you have in the sense of like, could you imagine if in a different life being one of these kind of Airstream trailer travelers, or how does your personality sync up with that?
Oh, I'm an Airstreamer at heart. I just don't have an Airstream. And I'm looking to, once my son graduates from high school, and depending on what he does, live at least part of the time in an Airstream.
Oh, wow.
Definitely opened up my eyes to richness of community. There really is a very rich, connected community in this world. It also has that whole idea of tiny homes. And then just this modern nomadic spirit. Like I've always had wanderlust. I just felt like I never had the means to do it.
Mm.
Now I see what Airstream, or it doesn't have to be Airstream, it can be any kind of RV, but what opportunities having an RV offers.
Right. Well, I can imagine, particularly with an Airstream, is that kind of it's a catalyst for discussion, in the sense of like, if you don't mind meeting new people, if you're traveling around an Airstream, everybody's going to want to talk to you and ask you about it. It's like having a cute puppy, I guess.
Yeah, you keep nailing all the points. This is great. Yeah, you talk to Airstreamers, and I mean, I was able to go out in an Airstream this past summer.
Mhm.
So every gas stop, people will walk up to you and say, one of the first questions is, "Hey, are they still making those?" And
Mhm.
then like the other one would be like somebody come up and expressing just sheer joy of seeing it, and then telling you their friend or their brother or so and so has an Airstream, and just start kind of downloading their experiences and connections to the world.
Yeah, I can only imagine. There's just a lot of joy there. What do you like in making the film? Was there something that kind of most surprised you that you didn't realize, like, until you got to the kind of the final cut, that you're like, I wouldn't have expected this from this journey at all?
Yeah, and I'm hoping there's some themes that come out of the movie, that they're apparent, that have to do with coming together. And it doesn't necessarily have to be Airstream, but Ansi McLean talks about it in the film. He says, it's sitting around the campfire and experiencing nature in the outdoors, and maybe, sitting at an Airstream event. People focus on their commonalities as opposed to their differences. And
Hmm.
that's one of the things that I see in this world, is that, there are people who are on different spots of the political spectrum than myself, that I've met and I can say are my friends. And I'm able to, because we have something, this joy, this passion for Airstreaming or camping, or, sitting around a campfire in common, we've already met because we have some commonalities and some overlap. And from that point, I think there's a sense of respect and a sense of patience and wanting to know more about each other. And ideas are, we're able to exchange ideas. And um, I think it's essential to community and staying together, and I do feel we're in very divided times, and anything that can bring us together, bring it on.
Yeah, that's beautiful. And I think a good thing to kind of keep in mind. This might be a little bit early because I know, sometimes, with a filmmaker, you know, once you wrap up a film, you're still out there getting out there into the world. Is there another project that you're working on? And does it kind of fit along the lines of these kind of design theme films that you've frequently worked on?
Yes, I'm working on my first narrative project.
Oh, cool.
I am writing my first script, and it is based on Ed Killingsworth, who was Killingsworth, Brady, and Smith, and then a number of other iterations of his design firm. He is, I think, one of the great unsung 20th century architectural heroes. He was one of Julius Schulman's favorite architects, and we focus on the transformation of around 18-person architectural firm having to scale, basically the client of a lifetime, Conrad Hilton, who commissioned them to do the Kahala Hilton, which opened in 1964, and it charts the transformation of Ed Killingsworth from a more boutique architect to an architect on the global stage, and became one of the major destination resort architects worldwide.
Very cool. That sounds exciting. We'll look forward to hearing how that kind of project develops. It's just a fascinating narrative. With Illumination, one of the things I always kind of try to remind our audiences is that, we're lucky enough that independent filmmakers and distributors kind of share their films with us at film festivals. And so by being blessed in that way, we're kind of the street team for the filmmakers that screen at these festivals. And so what are the, outside of sharing about their love for the film on social media, what's the best way to kind of continue to kind of, track the film, or even, yourself as a filmmaker?
Yeah. Well, first off, a big shout out to you and what you do, because without festivals and dedication and blood, sweat, and tears that you all put into this, I'd be afraid to kind of ponder where independent film would be. So thank you very much for what you do. In terms of where we're going, we are quite fortunate to have signed with our previous distributor, Art House Films. And Art House Films, in conjunction with Virgil Films, is looking at a number of different distribution paths. I know they're actively, as of now, pursuing those paths. So we're not quite sure what distribution will look like, but the best place that people can stay informed is go to our website, which is illuminationmovie.com, and sign up for our newsletter.
Very cool. So yeah, everybody, after watching the film tonight, please go to illumination.com and sign up for the newsletter, and please spread your word about Eric and his team's really wonderful movie. Thanks again for sharing it, Eric.
Thank you, Chris.